Hi team, in this video you're going to learn how private equity firms get up to speed on a new industry in due diligence. And to make this more interesting and to provide some context, I'm going to use an example from my career in private equity. I think this will provide a cool narrative while simultaneously allowing me to explain how private equity firms approach this more broadly. In 2013, I was looking at a manufacturer of large lead-acid batteries. And as part of our due diligence, we had to develop an opinion on the viability of this technology over newer battery technologies. At the time, lithium-ion batteries were becoming popular, and the concern was that this technology would one day replace lead-acid. Most of the professionals we spoke to believed that while lithium-ion was approximately 5 times more expensive than lead-acid in 2013, the price difference would be cut in half by 2020. There were also additional advantages to lithium-ion that included the life of the battery, charge time, and the amount of maintenance a lead-acid battery required. But what got us excited about pursuing older technology was that some of the supposed disadvantages of lead-acid were actually advantages in this particular end market. Most of the batteries made by this company went into forklifts, which was compelling for several reasons. First, the battery in a forklift serves as a counterbalance for the heavy items that a forklift transports. If the traditional lead-acid battery were replaced with a lithium-ion battery, a large weight would also have to be added to the forklift, which made it even more difficult to compete on price. Second, we were bullish on warehousing and industrial activity in general, which would help with top-line growth. Third, the cost per kilowatt hour of lead-acid batteries was substantially lower than that of newer technologies, especially when compared to lithium-ion batteries. And finally, the weight and size of a lead-acid battery manufactured for a forklift made proximity to clients important. It was less likely that a competitor in a city far removed from our location would compete with us on account of the cost of transportation. In short, we were excited to identify an area where the primary disadvantage of lead-acid batteries, the weight of the battery, was a requirement. The challenge, however, was that lithium-ion technology was getting a lot of attention, and we didn't know the degree to which this could threaten the company's revenues in the future. While a forklift would always require a large counterweight, a sufficiently competitive price for a competing energy solution might encourage the development of new material handling systems, or so we thought at the time. To better understand this dynamic, we took an approach that is common across private equity firms. We needed to get up to speed quickly, and we engaged the following resources to do so. First, we approached professional network firms. There are quite a few firms that sell access to networks of professionals across industries. For a fee, these firms will put the investment team in touch with executives that work at companies in an industry relevant to the due diligence underway. A private equity firm can request to meet with these individuals or simply connect with them over the phone. The Gerson Lerman Group is a good example of one of these groups. I've included some notes on this group in the PDF notes available for download. Now, we approach this resource first because it requires a substantial amount of work to get in touch. Before you contact the firm, you must have a detailed list of questions that you're trying to answer. In our case, we probably had 3 pages of questions, and the professional network firm will use these questions to identify the best match. And in response, we received a bunch of 1 to 2 page documents summarizing each of the proposed candidates' qualifications. We then responded with our choices, and the calls and meetings were coordinated. So it goes without saying that this can take a substantial amount of time. Next, you have third-party industry reports. Many consulting firms will work with private equity clients to prepare industry-specific overview, and this can be specific to the acquisition target. Bain & Company is a good example, but there are many smaller, more specialized firms as well. After that, we started looking at our internal network, starting with operating partners and portfolio company management teams. Most established private equity firms have a strong network of operators that they have worked with in the past. And in my experience, most are willing to remain engaged in some capacity, even after the business is no longer held by the private equity firm. The investment team should also look at the industry expertise of current management. Next, you have your investor base. A private equity firm's investor base should never be overlooked as a source of information. Many limited partners invest in multiple private equity funds or directly in companies themselves. If an investor has a network in an industry that would be helpful to the due diligence underway, they are likely to want to make that introduction. They are, after all, aligned with the investment team as investors. Finally, and this may sound obvious, but read everything online. There are some weird nerds out there that go to crazy lengths to create valuable industry information. Now, back to the processes we're working on specifically. Information gathered from the sources detailed solely filled multiple binders and notepads. We amassed a lot of data, and most of the information supported our investment thesis and price. But there was one piece of troubling information that we could not wrap our minds around. Somehow, Tesla was selling a lithium-ion battery at a much lower cost. The metric used to measure the cost of a battery is cost per kilowatt hour, and the discrepancy between lead-acid and lithium-ion in the marketplace supported the acquisition we were pursuing. What we could not yet answer was whether the discount offered by Tesla was temporary, sustainable, or worse, an indication that prices would continue to drop. Eventually, we learned that the Tesla battery was comprised of approximately 7,200 Panasonic 18650 lithium-ion cells, all housed together, and that a shift in market demand for these batteries had provided Tesla with an opportunity to purchase them at a very attractive price. According to industry professionals, the price was likely the result of an oversupply of this battery type in final production, and that once volumes adjusted for demand in the marketplace, the price would rise on account of the raw material cost. All of this information was collected over the course of several weeks, possibly months, while we worked towards a letter of intent with the majority shareholder and CEO of the business. And keep in mind that this was just one of a handful of transactions that we were working on at the time. And in this instance, we were not selected to move forward with the process. When this happens, it can feel devastating, largely due to the amount of work required just to make an offer. But it's why you have to stick to your valuation principles. It can become incredibly tempting to match what the investment banker or management team claims is required to win a process. When this temptation arises, remind yourself that the work completed led you to a valuation you believed fair. And while it's painful to toss that much work aside, babysitting an over-levered business for the hold period is far worse. Now, all of this research took place in tandem with many of the additional areas of due diligence required. We had multiple third parties engaged, including a group to conduct what is known as an environmental phase A report to confirm that the business had not damaged the environment, which is important when you're melting lead. Operations and safety were important as well. The facility had large warehouse-style rooms with professional ventilation and misters on the ceiling running 24/7 to keep the gases released by batteries being charged from overwhelming the facility. It follows that industry specialization can be a huge advantage in private equity. While it may limit the ability to look at investments opportunistically, it makes the internal process more efficient. A good friend of mine that works for a private equity firm in Boston once remarked that being industry agnostic is basically a decision to live with a perpetual amount of anxiety at all times, because you just don't know what you don't know. When a private equity firm makes the decision to look beyond its circle of competence as it relates to industry knowledge, there's generally good reason, or at least there certainly should be. In this instance, we believed we could add value in other ways, and that the business had been largely overlooked by private equity because lead acid technology was not as exciting to investors, especially with Tesla constantly making headlines. Now, while I don't regret all the work we did, I do find it comical recording this now. I've not since even looked at another opportunity in the battery space, and it's funny to me that the only value I will extract from this exercise is as an investment narrative and lesson on asimplemodel.com. So I hope you found it useful. All right, team, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.